Welcome everyone to our virtual tasting. We are bringing them back by popular demand. We weren't quite sure if anybody was interested in them anymore, so we decided we would bring some back, and it's so great to see all of your faces. My name is Sarah Rathbun. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here for Dry Creek Vineyard. Today, I'm joined by our winemaker, Tim Bell, and the amazing founders of Volo Chocolate, Jeff and Susan Mall. Couple housekeeping things. We're just to get started. We are going to ask everybody to try to stay on mute just so that we don't have any distractions or vacuum cleaners or dogs barking or any of that fun stuff. We will be using the chat down in the bottom, so please throw your questions in there. If it's possible, we can take a live question too, but it'd be great if we can kind of have the chat questions there. Otherwise, I think we are good. I would say the reason why we wanted to have this particular tasting was for a couple of reasons. One, we thought it'd be fun to do something around Valentine's Day, which is why we picked the Mariner and the Marinus, if you didn't quite get that connection. So we have a little love connection there. And then, of course, pairing it with chocolate. And Jeff and Susan have been such great friends to us, and we absolutely love featuring their chocolate in our tasting room. And we have done this once before with them way back in those days of COVID. And we wanted to bring it back because we had such a great time tasting with them before that we thought it would be fun to do with new wines. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to let Tim Bell go ahead and talk to you a little bit about some of the wines that we're drinking tonight. And then Jeff and Susan will tell us about the delicious chocolate that they decided to pair with it.
Well, welcome everyone. It's really fun to be doing this again. It has felt like too long, and I know I always had a lot of fun on these with these in the past, so glad to be welcomed back into your homes again this evening. And I've done a lot of times with these tastings, I like to start out with just sort of saying what's going on, what's happening in winemaking, in the cellar and the vineyards, all of that. And right now at this time of this year, we're pretty much kind of winding up pruning in the vineyard, and kind of just waiting for the weather to turn to start pushing the buds on the vines. The last couple of days have been sort of exceptionally cold, so we're not getting any growth or bud break right now. But that could all change in a few days, and a lot of times late February we get some pretty warm weather, and we're off to the races on a new growing season. But so pruning in the vineyards is happening, or just winding up. You see a lot of those cuttings, the hard woody canes that were last year's shoots. They've hardened off. They're on the ground. You might see somebody, a tractor going through and sort of chopping them up a little bit, and they, become organic matter that goes back into the soil. But in the cellar, we're quite busy. So we are really in the thick of blending and bottling. I was just scribbling some notes here before we started to think about all the blends we put together in just the last couple of weeks. So we have our Sauvignon Blanc 2022. These are all 2022 whites. And that's, we're going to get ready to start bottling that next week. And then we've got our 2022 DCV3 Sauvignon Blanc. Tomorrow we're blending the Taylor's Muscat. And also the Marinus is coming right up, and boy, that tasted really great. It was really nice to be tasting one vintage prior, but I'm really excited about 2022 as well. And then the Petit Zin Rosé, so that's already been blended and tastes great. I'm really excited about that wine coming up too. So lots of new wines coming along and getting ready to end up in a bottle and come to you. So that's kind of what we've got going on right now, and it's a full full slate. We really got the pedal to the metal in the cellar. I'm really excited about today's event too, and looking forward to hearing what you have to say about the chocolate pairings. I got to have a little sneak preview of it before we started, and I gotta say, Jeff and Susan are just really friendly, wonderful people, and engaging as well. So I think we're going to have a good time, good conversation. And I think I'll start off the conversation by talking about the Marinus. So 2021 vintage. And before going into the specifics of this wine, this is a newer wine, as most of you, if you're, wine club members, know that. And it's been a really wonderful project and fun project to work on. It's really great as a winemaker when you get to be there on the ground floor and create something totally new, as I did get to do with this wine. And our inspiration was a Bordeaux style white wine. And so the grape varieties that are used in Bordeaux, France, for whites are, of course, Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, and then there's this obscure one called Muscadel de Bordelais. And we had plenty of Sauvignon Blanc around here in Dry Creek Valley. You probably know that Dry Creek Vineyard was the first to plant, David Stair back in 1972, the first to plant Sauvignon Blanc in Dry Creek Valley, and has really been the pioneer of that variety in the region. And it's the signature white for us here in Dry Creek Valley. It just grows so well, makes beautiful wines. Semillon is definitely a little more unusual, a little bit off the beaten track, but certainly it's around. And we've been sourcing some the last few years from our good friend Greg Herrick.
The cellar I'm in.
And then the Muscadel, that was kind of one that I was wondering about. You never hear about that. Nobody around here grows that. I've never come across it in my entire career. And we were fortunate back when we started thinking about this wine that, we have a grower that we had worked with growing Sauvignon Blanc in the past. His name is Kevin Skeen, and he's got a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and just really one of those dedicated growers that you really want to connect with and have in your family. And so he told me, I've got 1 acre of land, and if you've got some unusual grape variety that you'd like a little bit of, I'll do it for you. And I said, well, what about Muscadel? And he was like, what's that? And then we did some homework and had to make sure that we were getting the right variety, because it's very unusual. And it actually, he had trouble with the first grafting of that too. So a lot of his plants didn't take, and he had to go through a second time and graft, replant rootstock and graft more vines. But it's really been fun to work with. It's so I'll tell you about a little bit of that, and then we'll back up into the other varieties and then kind of round out how does that come together in the blend. So the Muscadel de Bordelais is a very vigorous vine. It's just got a lot of energy. And so it's been a lot of work and trial and error in the vineyard, figuring out how to sort of tame that vine. And you got to give it enough buds on the vine so it's not being too vigorous. And the clusters themselves are pretty big. They're much bigger than Sauvignon Blanc, which just tends to be smaller clusters and small berries. Semillon can be kind of big, and it's got big berries. Probably the biggest berries of the three. But Muscadel, sort of medium-sized berries, but pretty big clusters. And so Kevin goes through and does some fruit thinning. He'll cut off some excessive clusters and really just positions it nicely. We do a lot of leafing, kind of get some good light exposure into the fruit. And so when it gets ripe, it has this nice sort of golden yellow color, and really beautiful sort of melon and ripe pear kind of flavors, maybe a little honeydew. None of the green notes that you get in Sauvignon Blanc. So that's the Muscadel, and we always, it's a small amount of fruit we get. So it's handpicked. We whole cluster press it. We barrel ferment it, and variety of different wood treatments. And then the Semillon. So Semillon, again, has been very much a traditional blender with Sauvignon Blanc in Bordeaux, and we it adds some nice texture and body, and a little more richness to the blend, and kind of some more subtle flavors. You get some riper fruit flavors. A lot of people say fig. If it's very ripe, it can get sort of figgy. We try to pick it, pretty ripe, but not overripe, and where it's starting to raisin or whatever. And then Sauvignon Blanc, the one we're so familiar with, is such a complex variety, so many layers of flavor. And with this blend, there's a few key vineyards that we look to for this, and so when we're researching, trying to figure out what are we going to do to make this Marinus special, unique, and different from our other Sauvignon Blanc based blends, we really turn to the inspiration of Bordeaux. They typically will do some barrel fermentation and aging, and so we've gone that route. If you've heard me ever talk about Sauvignon Blanc in the past, I've talked about our Dry Creek Sauvignon Blanc, just that bottling. We use some acacia barrels and chestnut barrels, and no new oak. And it was really because when I first started trying barrel fermentation with Sauvignon Blanc and new oak, I wasn't finding a good combination there. The oak was just too woody and covering up the beautiful flavors in the grape and the wine. But over a number of years, and talking to coopers and working with different lighter style toasts, we found a few coopers that of French oak barrels that have a really nice toast that works with Sauvignon Blanc. And the right toast for me is leaves you with maybe a subtle flavor of ginger and some baking spices, sort of nutmeg, cinnamon, that kind of stuff, and allspice. And so if you use just a little bit of that, maybe 18-20% new oak in the blend for the Marinus, it's a really beautiful little spice accent. And we're usually somewhere around 65 to 70% barrel fermented in any given vintage of Marinus. The 2021 is just over 70% barrel fermented, and like I said, it's 20% new oak. And we also use some acacia barrels. This was actually this year, the 21, we used quite a bit, so 35% acacia barrels. And the benefit of acacia is it has a very subtle flavor impact. So the benefit of barrel fermentation, you get some texture and richness, a little exposure to yeast, longer than maybe if you were in tank. So you get a slight yeastiness and some more richness and texture. And then the acacia, if it's the wine's in the barrel maybe 5 months plus, you get this really subtle sort of wintergreen note that I really like underneath, some nice ripe, sort of lime and kiwi and maybe peach or passion fruit kind of flavors and that come with Sauvignon Blanc. So that and a little bit of chestnut, which adds a nice vanilla cream note. We use smaller percentages of that because it can be really overpowering at higher percentages. So all of that kind of comes together, and looking at the vineyards that contributed to this, besides the Herrick and the Skene that I mentioned, there's a lot of usual suspects for the Marinus. So our own DCV3, the classic vineyard, and the first vineyard of Sauvignon Blanc in Dry Creek Valley, the DCV6, that's a vineyard right across the road from the winery, and just makes beautiful Sauvignon Blanc. It's always a candidate for the Marinus, and typically is one of the wines that gets some of the new oak barrels that are part of this blend too. Our friends, longtime growers, the Comstocks, the Saini family, another great multi-generational family here in Dry Creek Valley. Their Sauvignon Blanc is always, one of the best ones. And also Wayne Rogers, another long time grower and a friend of the winery. So his fruit is typically part of this. And we use some of the Musquet clone of Sauvignon Blanc as well. So that's if you've had the Taylor's Musquet, it's a very sort of floral, aromatic clone. We were just talking about this in the lab the other day, and Laura in our lab said, what's Musquet like? She used to work in the tasting room. She'd tell people, well, it's kind of like if Sauvignon Blanc and Viognier had a love child, and that's what Sauvignon Musquet is like. So it is Sauvignon Blanc, but it's a distinct selection of it that's really special. So we used about 12% of that Musquet selection in this 2021 blend. I'll turn it over to Jeff and Susan in just a second here. But I was really, I'll say, wonderfully surprised how much I liked this pairing with the chocolate and how much it enhanced the wine. And I thought it really brought out more fruit was a real revelation to me. So that's my piece on the wine, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about the chocolate.
All right, Tim, thank you. So yeah, I'm Jeff Mall.
Susan?
So we're the owners of Volo Chocolate here in Sonoma County, just about 15 minutes south of Dry Creek Vineyard. So we are a bean to bar chocolate maker, which means that difference between chocolatier and chocolate maker.
We're the ones that really, we're the hardcore ones. We make chocolate.
Chocolatier is somebody who buys chocolate and makes amazing, beautiful bonbons and truffles and like that. But we actually, we buy, we source cocoa beans from around the world, and we roast and grind and refine and actually produce the chocolate itself. So it's like two different things that are under the same umbrella. But we're really excited to be here. Our relationship with Dry Creek Vineyard goes back to before we were chocolate makers and we were chefs and we had a restaurant, and we worked closely with Dry Creek Vineyard over the years for catering, for featuring the wines on the list at Zen, which was our restaurant in Healdsburg. But just real quick, give a quick history. How did we become chocolate makers, honey?
Well, we had this restaurant, Zen Restaurant and Wine Bar in Healdsburg, and sold it 8 years ago, almost exactly to this date. We accepted a full-time job at a boutique hotel where we had been consulting for the previous 5 years, which just happened to be on the Pacific Ocean in southern Baja California, Mexico. So we packed the elderly dogs and an old cat and the truck and drove to Mexico. 3-day drive.
I say 32 hours behind the
32,
wheel.
yeah.
So,
But we were down there, and while we were working, we saw that the previous chef had left behind some cocoa beans, and Jeff made the fateful question to me. He's like, honey, I wonder how hard it is to make chocolate. And I kind of went, oh my God, because at Zen, we made all our own sausage, bacon, bread, everything we've ever done, we've made from scratch. So of course, we're going to try chocolate. So we did.
yeah, so we learned how to make chocolate while working in Mexico. We were lucky that some of our Mexican coworkers, their families came from mainland Mexico, so they had history of making chocolate in the family. And it was literally, learning on the job how to do it. And, we made a couple batches and they were okay. I wouldn't say they were great, but each batch got better and better. And in August of 2016, we moved back home to Sonoma County and started Volo Chocolate. So we're happy to be here. We're happy to have such a great working relationship with so many of our wonderful friends here. But I guess we should start talking about the chocolate itself right now. So
Do they have their wine in their glasses?
yes, wine. Everybody should have their wine in their glass. But real quick, there's so many parallels between growing cacao and growing grapes and making wine and making chocolate. And that one of the first things is terroir. Terroir makes all the difference in the world in the wines. That's why you don't have coastal Oregon Zinfandels. It's Dry Creek Valley. Terroir in cacao is that each country or kind of region that grows cacao has a different kind of flavor profile. So the first chocolate that we're going to taste today is our 73% deep dark that's got candied orange peel. And we make this with cacao from Guatemala. And the beans that we get from Guatemala are bright and fruity. They have a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of acid, but there's just this natural acid that comes through because much like developing the flavor in wine, all cacao is fermented. Fermentation is where you build the flavors of the chocolate. So you get this brightness that comes through, and these specific beans from Guatemala are fruit driven, kind of cherry driven. And it's interesting is that each year you'll find that cherry flavor, but some years it can be a real concentrated dried cherry. Most of the time it's a bright ripe cherry, but that's the basis.
Even raspberry or strawberry.
Yeah, but you're getting that in the chocolate. So to this chocolate, We've also added some candied orange peels from our own orange trees. And so we're kind of upping that kind of brightness too with the candied orange peel. And I think that this is going to be something where you're going to say, I had never thought about pairing a white wine with chocolate, but this is where you can see that it can work. So much the same way that you can geek out on tasting wine or coffee or anything like that, there's a proper way to taste chocolate. And Susan is going to kind of go through that because she loves to do
Because
it.
I do love to do it. So you'll pick up your chocolate, hold it between your fingers, and you rub it so that the heat of your body heats the chocolate, and then take a good smell. And then I pop it in my mouth, chew it a couple times, float it around on the top of my taste buds. Jeff holds it in his mouth and just lets it melt. And truly, close your eyes for a sec and see what flavors you can catch. It's always fun to see people in wineries, winemakers, sommeliers, to catch all these super nuanced flavors.
And then, you know, after you take the first bite, then we'll kind of focus it, kind of tie it in with the wine. And then, you know, taste some wine, come back to the chocolate, go back to the wine. And that's where you can kind of really kind of have it kind of come together.
So I know this is new. Raise of hands. You like it? Don't like it? Good. Yeah, I see. Okay. Yeah, good.
So one of the things about us as chefs making chocolate, and this kind of helps our chocolate out quite a bit, is that all of our chocolate has a pinch of sea salt refined into it. And, you know, sea salt, salt in general tones down bitterness. So we have the salt kind of toning down some of the bitterness in the chocolate. It's also opening up some of the other flavors that are in there, which is helping it be a little more wine friendly. You know, I will never say that it's always going to be the perfect match, but we like to think that our dark chocolate with that little bit of sea salt in it is a more friendly wine pairing chocolate than most anything else you'll find out there.
Yeah, the other thing that we have in all of our bars, because we learned how to do this in Mexico and understand why, cinnamon is, we have just a pinch of cinnamon in the bar. And we, you know, it is a nod to us learning in Mexico because they put cinnamon in. But we did try other spices and came back to, no wonder they use cinnamon. It really pulls out highlights of the chocolate. So we like complex foods. We like deep flavors. We like things that kind of layer upon one another. And this chocolate will just keep opening up in your mouth. So you can take another sip of wine and still taste the chocolate.
And as we go through, if you guys have any questions, please, you can either type them into the chat or unmute and ask us. We'll answer everything we can know about chocolate. Everything.
How much time do you have?
we as chefs, pre-chocolate making, the only thing I knew about chocolate was that I really didn't like chocolate because it was too sweet for me and I didn't have a sweet tooth. So we started making chocolate. We make the chocolate that we like, which is dark with that little bit of sea salt. But, you know, we truly have learned a ton about this coming from a place where and if you had asked me back in the days of the restaurant, if I could have ever envisioned myself as a chocolate maker, it would have been no way. I cannot see that happening at all, but here we are.
Well, Jeff and Susan, you're talking about some really interesting kind of flavor combinations that you're doing. What are some of the other flavors of chocolate that you make?
Well, so this is our 73%, and this is our darkest chocolate with the cacao from Guatemala. So we do this same chocolate minus the orange peel, and that's our deep dark. And then we also use this as a base for our newest variety, which is our 70% Meyer lemon and extra virgin olive oil. And before you go along thinking that that sounds like a salad dressing, not a chocolate, it actually is really good because, you know, blending in that 3% extra virgin olive oil into the chocolate really kind of gives you these deep base notes, earthiness coming from the olive oil. We candy the Meyer lemon peels much the same way we do the orange peels, except they're in smaller pieces and they're more throughout the bar. And that's just a really, when people see it, they're a little bit like, I don't know what to think about that one. And then they taste it and it's so good.
That one also, it's a little harder to pair with a white wine, but it can bring out some really wonderful notes.
And then we also do dark milk chocolate. And people think, well, what is dark milk chocolate? Because most people say there's dark chocolate and there's milk chocolate. And they think of milk chocolate as this really sweet, milk chocolate that we grew up with. So what we say is that our dark milk chocolate is really a dark chocolate with just a little bit of milk added to it. So most European milk chocolate is in the 30% range of cacao. And how much cacao is in a Hershey milk chocolate bar?
Okay, ready to be frightened? There's 11% cacao in a Hershey bar. They will not even allow it to be called chocolate in England.
Yeah, so it's just called a Hershey bar. So that's our Hershey. So and that's what we grew up on. I mean, I was actually crazy as a kid when I would eat milk chocolate. Like I said, I didn't have a sweet tooth, so I sprinkled salt on it even as like a kid. So when we make our dark milk chocolate, we actually caramelize the milk and we add brown butter. So we're really getting these kind of dulce de leche flavors into that chocolate. So we do that as a pure bar. We also do it with olive oil roasted almonds. And then we do one with figs and hazelnuts too, which is another amazing chocolate. And then what's our third kind of chocolate?
A third kind of chocolate is a dark cream chocolate. So this allows us to keep our cacao numbers high, meaning that there's a greater percentage of cacao in the bar. And the cream gives you that beautiful full mouth feel without a lot more, you're not diluting the cacao. So you can put less in. And it's really quite beautiful. So that base, we've got a mocha where we grind wolf coffee in with the cocoa beans. You can't taste the crunch, it's totally smooth. And then we've got our caramel crunch. And anybody that's bought the caramel crunch before will notice. So right up here is the area that appears on our caramel crunch bar.
The quilts. So all of our labels, our label art comes from quilts done by my aunt, who's a textile artist. And you'll get to taste that cream chocolate in our second bar, which is the MexiCali. So we have 9 varieties altogether. We love coming up with new varieties and doing tastings and trial and error. And
we have to keep it interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we had a question from Doris saying you stated your source of cacao beans from, or you source your cacao beans from around the world. How many countries are you sourcing from?
3 countries. So Guatemala, Haiti, and Madagascar. And so in each of those has its own unique flavor profile. I will say that in narrowing it down to these 3, we made test batches from probably 17 different origins. Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Belize, the Philippines. We've done lots of experimental batches, but we really love the flavor that come from the Guatemalan beans. We've actually traveled to Guatemala to meet the growers that provide the beans to us. And then we love the beans from Haiti for a whole different reason. And we'll kind of go into that when we talk about the second bar and the tasting.
Perfect. Well, should we move on then to the Mariner and kind of move towards the red and the next chocolate?
Sure, sounds good. Boy, I love hearing you talk about the chocolates. I've got so many questions now that I want to ask.
Invite us out there some evening and we'll sit and talk and eat chocolate and drink wine.
Well, I was thinking when you're making up a new style or a new flavor, I'm your man right here.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting before I even tasted the chocolate, and when Jenny brought me a glass of this Marinus, I wrote some tasting notes about what I was, I always like to say, what am I smelling and tasting right now? I wrote down in the aroma, candied orange. I just thought it was really, I didn't even know that the chocolate was going to have candied orange peel in it. So that was pretty fun. Yeah, so the Mariner, this is, you know, a wine you've known and loved if you've been part of the wine club for quite some time, and it's our finest Bordeaux style red blend of any given vintage. And I always tell people it's probably the most difficult blend, the one that takes the most care to make, because there's so many potential pieces. And I don't know if you can see this, but nope, my camera's not cooperating. I've got a spreadsheet here with a lot of different barrels of wine that went into this blend. It really is a barrel by barrel selection. So we use all 5 of the Bordeaux red grape varieties. So that's Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Malbec, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot. Every year's blend is different. It's, just based on the vintage, and it's really just cherry picking the best of the best. So, if I love, Cabernet from Walcott Vineyard in, this particular, let's say a Quintessence new French oak barrel with a Chateau style toast. Well, we'll pick, those 2 barrels of that. And then if we've got some Petit Verdot from our Endeavor Vineyard, that I really love how it tastes in the second fill barrels that it's in. Okay, that's going in too, right? And just little by little we put it together. This year's blend, the 2019, it's 61% Cabernet and 18% Merlot. There's 11% Malbec, 8% Petit Verdot, and then 2% Cabernet Franc. 2019 was a vintage that was cooler. In a lot of ways, in some ways, it was really a winemaker's vintage, because that cooler weather allowed for slower development, and it didn't make for a very fast harvest. So we could really cherry pick vineyards and blocks and sub blocks of vineyards to pick at the the optimum ripeness and not be rushed at all. So just kind of little by little. So it was a long harvest. It was one of the longest harvests in my entire almost 12 years now here at Dry Creek Vineyard. So some of the key vineyards in this are, I just mentioned some, like Endeavor Vineyard. This is our vineyard at the southeast part of the Appalachian, closer to Alexander Valley, a little bit warmer spot. Beautiful rolling rocky soil, rolling hills and rocky soil, and there it is. And by the way, you see in the foreground there that reservoir. We don't use any groundwater there. It's all runoff that's collected in the pond. And the good news is that pond is filled almost to the brim after the January rains. It's pretty. We're so grateful after at least, I don't know, 3 years where we've been giving spoonfuls of water to each of the vines. So anyhow, we grow a Cabernet there. The Cabernet is in the behind the pond there in the foreground, and you can't really see it in this photo, but there's a block of Petit Verdot, and both of those are very key to this blend. The Cabernet is always some of the best Cabernet we get in any given vintage, really nicely concentrated and rich, a lot of dark chocolate notes. And the Petit Verdot has this beautiful fruit and richness and texture, good tannin structure that really contributes to the wine. Another really key vineyard is our DCV6 vineyard, which is immediately adjacent to the winery. And that's this here, and kind of up on the slopes, which is sort of more almost behind the camera, is some Cabernet Franc and the Malbec. So we only got 2% in the 2019 vintage of the Cabernet Franc. Some years it's more, but it's the best Cabernet Franc hands down that I've ever worked with in my whole career. It's a selection from the Loire Valley, known for its intensity of color, and it really does deliver on that. So Cabernet Franc is a lighter bodied and lighter colored wine than Cabernet Sauvignon typically, and this is fits that description. But for Cabernet Franc, it's pretty rich and dark. And then the Malbec there is amazing. We used quite a bit, so 11% in 2019. I know we used quite a bit in 2013 too, and it was a lot of it was the effort to sort of tame the tannins of the 2013 vintage, which was the wines were so big and muscular. 2019 was a really interesting vintage for the reds because and when you're fermenting reds, your color extraction happens very quickly. So as soon as the fermentation heats up and you get that cap forming within maybe like 3 days, 4 days, you've got most of your color typically. But just visually, it didn't seem to be happening that fast in 2019. And so we had to sort of work the cap more aggressively for a longer period in 2019. And in general, we left the wine in contact with the skins longer. So I was looking back at how long we left the wine on the skins, and a typical time for the Bordeaux reds might be at the very shortest, maybe 12 days on the skins, out to 15, 16, 17 days. And, a lot of these lots, started at about 20 days. And, the longest was 33 days on the skins for one of our Cabernets. We did some extended maceration from the Voganson vineyard, which is, always a key to our Iron Slopes Cabernet. And we use some of that in this blend, of course. And then just to highlight a few other vineyards and growers, the Merlot is largely from the Long vineyard, which is, the Long family, again, is multi-generational growers that we've been working with for a long, long time. No pun intended. Is that a pun? But 30, 40 years, I think, maybe even longer. And I mentioned Voganson, and our friends at Puma Springs have some wonderful Cabernet, and a little bit of that Merlot was used in here. And of course, Walcott. If any of you have been around the wine club, you've heard us talk about that vineyard in the context of making this wine as well. It's a beautiful vineyard on the Eastern Bench. So it's a little bit more elegant Cabernet, but really another nice ingredient. And one of the things we did was also a co-fermentation of some Cabernet and Petit Verdot from Andrew Forchini's vineyard. So that was another nice little piece of this. Basically the harvest for this blend kind of extended over almost a month from late September into late October. So it was a very late ending harvest as well. 46% new oak, combination of French and Hungarian oak. Some of our very finest coopers for making aging Bordeaux reds. And I've been working with this wine recently in the marketplace. It's really showing well, and I love it. So I'm gonna stop talking, stop monopolizing the conversation, and I'd love to hear more about the chocolate that we've got going for this one.
Okay, thank you, Tim. So the chocolate that we're going to pair with this is our 70% MexiCali, and this is what we're talking about as a cream chocolate. So that's where we can add just a little bit of cream and get more bang for our buck than adding milk to the chocolate. So we can add just a little bit, kind of add some richness to it. And the MexiCali bar, people were asking us when we first started, they're saying, when are you going to make a bar with chilies in it? When are you going to have a spicy chocolate? And the thing was, I never liked spicy chocolate. I didn't like that.
He didn't, I did.
But I didn't like that heat that came through. So when we were getting this thought about putting together a bar with some spice in it, the things that it had to be for us, like all of our chocolate, has to be balanced, right? We don't want anything that's gonna be out of balance. We want the heat, we want the flavor from the chilies, but not the heat. So we had 3 different chilies, and each one's giving a little something different to the bar. So much like blending in the wine, we're adding just a touch of chili arbol, which is going to give a little bit of heat. We're adding chili New Mexico, which adds a really rich chili flavor without heat. And then we're adding in a little California chili, which is a little bit of brightness to it. And that heat's very well tempered by cherries. So we add some dried tart cherries. So even though you have that heat, as you're tasting this chocolate, you'll taste it and you'll be like, I don't taste any heat. And then just as you're finishing the bite, that little bit of residual warmth will come in. There's also a little bit of more cinnamon in this bar than our others, because we wanted this to kind of evoke maybe a little mole-esque flavor. So, traditional mole, chilies, a little bit of chocolate,
Dried fruit
and cinnamon. I mean, those are the kind of the notes in there. So we really love this bar. And it's, you know, when you think of it, you're like MexiCali, spicy wine pairing, but this is actually one of our favorite bars to do in a pairing, because you have a lot of flavor in this bar, but you're not getting that, you know, hit you over the head heat. It's just very well balanced.
When we first did this tasting and sent the chocolate over, Robert Kennard, manager over at Dry Creek, he's like, okay, I didn't think I was going to like this with anything. And he said, it really works. I was shocked.
Yeah. So would love to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, we really love this.
Yeah, I love how it picks up so many different notes in the wines. I don't know, Tim, now that I haven't heard your spin on, I heard your spin on kind of how the other chocolate with the orange peel worked with the marinades. How do you feel like these two go together?
I really enjoy it. And you know, just the chocolate by itself, I really love the combination of the chilies, because you know, when I first tasted that, I got you know, the dried chilies, you know, no heat. And then here comes the heat. And I was like, oh, how hot's it going to get? So it just kind of peaked at just the right spot for me.
Yeah.
It was really nice. And I, you know, for me, taking the sip of the Mariner after that, I got a lot of bright cherry, another sip, you know, actually kind of, for me, maybe it's the combination of chocolate in the mouth, but I just felt like the wine even revealed some chocolate notes. And I thought it was interesting that those flavors are in the chocolate and they're in the wine. And I thought, you know, maybe they would cancel each other out, but it kind of brought them out in the wine. That was really nice.
Yeah. And we actually make this with the cacao from Haiti. So the beans themselves, they don't have the same brightness that the Guatemalan cacao has. The Haitian beans are more notes of roasted coffee and toasted nuts. So much less acid into the beans into this one. So
we did add the cherries.
But we did add the cherries that are adding some of that tart, a little bit of acid to it. But we love the beans from Haiti for our milk chocolate for those reasons. You really emphasize the kind of this toastiness, roasted nut flavors that you think of when you think of milk chocolate. And so even without having nuts in this bar, we're once again kind of building into that almost mole profile.
Honey, how much chocolate did we make last year?
We made, well, I know we made over 10,000 pounds.
Pounds.
Yeah, so 2 ounces at a time. So, you know, we're coming to you live from our little factory here in Windsor, and yeah, so you know, chocolate making is it's a process. You know, we're lucky we have some great employees that have been with us, and each one of these bars completely made by hand. You know, from start to finish. By us here.
And Mick and Elena.
Yeah.
Jeff and Susan, I have a question for you, because this idea of heating up and smelling the chocolate is really interesting, and I haven't done that before until tonight. And I just want to see if you think I'm off base, but like the first chocolate, I just went back and tried it again, you know, heat it up a little bit, smell it. I get sort of a you know, a little bit of earthiness and almost like even a little funk. I don't know how to say it, but in the not so much in the other one. It's just more chocolatey in the second one. Am I on or off there?
You're totally on. This to me is really the great chocolate to understand what a terroir in a chocolate means, because we have sugar, cinnamon, salt, little cocoa butter, and just the beans. And you can get the purest flavor out of it. And so, you know, that little bit of the funk or the earthiness comes through.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny, every time that there's a vintage change different year harvest, we have to go back and kind of, you know, test our original recipe against the current vintage, because we really like to kind of maintain the same flavor profile throughout everything that we make. And so, especially with the Guatemalan, in the last vintage, it had a lot more brightness. I mean, it was
And they
like,
were also chubby beans.
the beans were fatter when we got them. So the fermentation was different and it required a different roasting profile. So roasting cacao is much like roasting coffee. It's not like, you know, preheat the oven, put it in and pull it out and it's done. You know, roasting cacao, we try to hit certain benchmarks along a curve in a certain time frame. And we found that with these bigger and fatter beans from the Guatemalan cacao, is that we had to slow down the roasting
Mhm.
and extend the time to get them thoroughly roasted. But
Normally, it's a 20-minute procedure on the roasting. And what are we doing on these?
these are going for about 22 minutes now in our profile.
Makes a difference.
But it is, you do get some more of that little bit of funk that comes through. In that I think is unique to this year. Well, which has been last year's harvest, 2022.
And what is the typical kind of harvest season for cacao?
In the spring. So
There's actually two.
yeah, so it'll fruit, the cacao will fruit year round, but there's two main harvest seasons, but the big one is in the spring. So like in March, April, May is you know, in the northern hemisphere is when it's mainly harvested. We traveled to Guatemala, was that in March of 2018. And it was an amazing trip to go and meet the farmers that grow the cacao for us. And one of the greatest things that we did was take some of our chocolate made with their beans. Because what happens at origin, same thing with coffee, is that a lot of time the farmers never taste the final product of what is made with what their livelihood is. So we brought our deep dark bar, so this orange bar minus the orange, and we tasted the chocolate made in the village using those same beans. So,
And it was a 50% chocolate, 50% sugar,
very
really
rustic,
gritty, kind of looked like a tortilla.
but it was amazing to pick out the flavor, the same flavor profile, right? We talk about the cherry, we talk about the brightness. I mean, you were like, it was just tasting two different, you know, versions of the same recipe, basically. I mean, really tasting the same flavors in this village chocolate is very rough as what we find in our final product of our deep dark bar.
Jeff and Susan, I'm totally ignorant of the process of how you make chocolate, but when you get the beans, is it like a race against time? Like, or do you have to like use it right away, or do they have a shelf life? Or
Yeah, so at origin is where the main time crunch is. So much like picking grapes, they harvest doesn't start until they hit a certain Brix. They wait till the sugar
Okay,
content.
I'm gonna stop you. The Brix. So they use a refractometer. They check the pods for their sugars. And when they are between 16 and 21 Brix, then they pick.
And then the race then is to get them fermented. So all the cacao gets fermented, and that's where the real time crunch is, and where actually more of the expertise comes in on the growing and that first bit of processing. Because if it's not fully fermented or correctly fermented, you will get these off flavors in the chocolate, and to the point where it can be just completely inedible.
We did that once.
Yeah, we learned the hard way about sourcing cacao that wasn't fully fermented.
Yeah.
And then it's dried.
And it's purple when it's not fermented.
And when it's dried, they spread them out in a greenhouse and they kind of solar dry. And then it's packed up into bags and exported. And by the time we get it, it's in the giant, 120-pound sacks. And we get it, we have about a year, we have about 14 months in which the beans are whole and they will kind of maintain the same flavor profile, not a rush to try to get it, transferred into chocolate. So the main time crunch and expertise on the bean itself is at harvest. So when we get it, probably the most important thing we do is the roasting profile and making sure that that's dialed in, because that's where we're really creating the right roast for each bean so that we don't cook out some of the really fine flavors that are in there, or don't undercook it and have more of the greenness come through. So it's this kind of,
There's a balance there too.
Yeah, finding that balance in the roasting.
So you had a question to clarify with Paul about the fermentation of the beans. Does it take place inside the beans?
It's, so they harvest so they'll take these pods, they break them open, they scoop out the wet pulpy mass. If it looks like the inside of a cucumber, imagine a cucumber the size of a football. Beans are in the middle, it's kind of this pulpy mass. They'll go into a big harvest bin, the equivalent like a big box, 4x4 box.
It's
And
lined with banana leaves.
in the heat of the jungle, the sugar on the beans, the wild yeast, it starts fermenting right away. And that has to be controlled. So like every couple hours, much like punch down in a winery, they're stirring that fermentation box, making sure that all the beans are getting evenly fermented. They're monitoring the temperature the whole time. And so that's a real technical part of harvest.
That's a 6 to 7 day process. And depending, some of the farms are experimenting with leaving them undisturbed for 24 hours or leaving them undisturbed for 48. And it truly does change the flavor. It changes the end product. But one thing I want to point out, there's been controversy or concern lately about lead and cadmium in cacao. And something important to know, all the cacao that we use is dried above ground on slats. It does not touch the ground. The majority of the cacao that has the cadmium and the lead is dried directly on the ground.
And one other side note about that is that, there's more heavy metals found in leafy greens, shellfish, and legumes too. So.
That's funny. We deal with that in winemaking, that, people are concerned about the level of sulfur, and it's like, well, dried apricots actually have a higher level of sulfur than wine does. So
Yeah.
it's all about perspective, and that's a really great point to make.
This is a cacao pod. This one is dried out. If this was fresh and ripe, it'd be about twice that size and would be brightly colored. They're orange and green and red, but that gives you an idea. So this is like a mini Nerf football. A cacao pod is more like a regular elongated football.
Or Mexican papaya.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, Doris was reading my mind and asking about, are the flavors kind of, do you have staple flavors? Do you have seasonal flavors? Are things rotating in and out? Kind of how do we make sure that we can get the things we love from you?
So we've got our 9 standard, which are the ones that we've talked about in the different categories. Seasonally, we do come out with fun things, like for this particular holiday season, we did a dark milk chocolate with peppermint and cocoa nibs. And then Jeff had fun playing with something called
El Pumpkin Spicy, which contained no pumpkin spice whatsoever. So El Pumpkin Spicy was our kind of tongue-in-cheek bar that had toasted pumpkin seeds and dried mango and tahine. And tahine is a Mexican fruit spice that you sprinkle on ripe mango or pineapple, and it's got lime and salt and chili. So we did this, called it El Pumpkin Spicy with toasted pumpkin seeds, the tahine and dried mango, and that was a lot of fun, and that was really good.
And right now we've got things that aren't offered anywhere else. We've got our solid dark chocolate hearts that come in a slender box. We've also got the chocolate salted caramels also in a box. And oh my God.
It's almost bunny season too.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen some bunnies come from you before.
Yeah, it's almost chocolate bunny season. So
solid chocolate, milk chocolate bunnies.
So we'll be making those. And now we're actually, we have the ability now to produce our own packaging in-house. So we're going to be doing some smaller runs of seasonal bars that will be on our website. And if people check back in with us, we'll have some fun things coming up.
If you sign up for our email list, we've used it once.
You won't get a bunch of junk. We've been doing this for 7 years. We sent out one email. So
yeah. We also have a chocolate club. You can subscribe. There are different size packages. You can get 4, we call it the Gustus, and it's our selection of 4 that rotates. The Perfectus is 6 bars, and we rotate those varieties. Then we've got the Maximus, which is 6 bars plus an extra, and we rotate those as well. We, from time to time, will offer the complete set.
And
And then you can just say, who is it? We've got one guy. What's he get?
no, he gets he eats 1 bar a day. So he literally
Close.
yeah.
I think it's a half.
He gets
bar.
a half bar a day. So every 2 weeks he gets 7 bars. But you know, you can tell that you could get 2 bars a month or whatever. So we have our chocolate club to do that. But yeah, if you just check with our website, you know, as we get into the spring, we're looking to, you know, do some more kind of spring flavored bars with you know, dried strawberries and things like that.
Okay, we just had a question from George about whether or not we did tastings here at our factory. Shh,
But yes,
we do. We don't advertise it. You know, everybody would be here then. So, but take a look on our website. You can send us an email, and if you're in the area and say, oh, I want to bring like 4 people, can we come by, and is there a charge? And it depends on how many people and what time of year and how much you want to try and how involved it gets. But yeah, Jeff and I have fun being the tour guides.
another thing that we do, and we're going to put together another one, we actually do guided chocolate and cheese pairing. So if you like chocolate and you like cheese, and if you've ever had a pairing of the two together, that's pretty amazing. Because imagine that, you know, in 2 bites, you're creating a chocolate cheesecake bite using the best chocolate and the best cheese. So we work with local cheesemakers. We're actually going to be giving a presentation at the California Artisan Cheese Festival
In March.
about pairing our chocolate with cheese. And that's a lot of fun too. And it's great when you throw wine into that mix, because then you have the trifecta, chocolate, cheese, and wine. So many times a great cheese can be the perfect bridge between chocolate and wine. And it just really is fun and unique. And it's something that we love to do.
Really, truly, you want to have fun with a group of friends. I mean, a lot of you are with friends. This is great. Pull out some wine, pull out some of our chocolate, get some cheeses, and say, oh, this tastes really good with the chocolate and the cheese, but I don't like it with the wine and the chocolate. But
Mix and match.
You'll mix and match, and you'll find different pairings, and your table will be covered with chocolate and cheese and wine glasses.
Well, that sounds like a place I want to be for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff and Susan, for joining us.
Thank you for
Tim,
having
for
us.
taking time out of your schedule to be here. We
Yeah.
loved seeing everyone. Oh, I hear one last question. We're going to sneak it in, Michael.
We don't use bacon. Not yet. That's a not yet. We may at some point. We'll never say never on bacon. But
Sign
no.
me up for that one when you do.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. One last question. You guys were supposed to ask the questions during the tasting. So one last question of how did the name Volo originate? I don't think you told us that.
So when we were first setting things up, we had a completely different name
And look.
and a look and to our design. And we met with our attorney. And he said, you're going to have to come up with a different name. There could be a potential trademark thing down the road. Most likely not, but you don't want to get down that far and have it, you know, come back. I said, so we want to file everything on Monday, and this is a Friday. So you have a whole weekend to come up with a new name and a new concept. So you take it off.
We scrambled. We tried going to the Healdsburg Museum, and what can we take away from there, and what history, and there were mercury mine or quicksilver mines. It's like, you don't want to have chocolate called quicksilver. So we then started thinking, well, Latin names, let's keep it short and simple. And so we started going through, of course, using iPads and phones, looking up in the dictionaries. Okay, what's tasty in Latin, and is it already taken? And so many of the ones that we wanted were already being used by a lot of companies.
Well, and we wanted a 3-letter name. I thought it'd be great to have a 3-letter name. They were all taken or it didn't apply. So into 4 letters, and we're going through Latin, you know, online dictionaries. And almost at exactly the same time, each of us said, oh, I think I found something. And
Literally, this did happen.
we came across the same name, Volo, which was want or desire. And we thought, how perfect is that for chocolate? And I like the look of it. So there it is. That's how we came up with Volo.
I love that. Any other questions going to sneak into the chat before we say goodnight? No. Okay. Well, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to follow up. You can email us at Dry Creek Vineyard. You can get a hold of Jeff and Susan on their website. There's some links in the chat that have all the different chocolates that they were talking about. So hopefully we have you covered from wine and chocolate. I just want to give you a heads up, a little sneak peek that we are going to have another virtual tasting actually a month from today. On the 16th, we are going to be highlighting the Mariner vertical set. So 3 different vintages of the Mariner going through and seeing how they age. So I believe it's the 17, 18, 19. And we will have winemaker Tim Bell here again to walk us through the different nuances and vintages. So that will be delicious. You might want to snag an extra bar of the MexiCali chocolate from Volo, so you can be sneaking that during the virtual tasting and try it with the different vintages. Thank you so much for your continued support and for having, spending the time with us tonight. We really love seeing all your faces. We can't wait to see you in person soon. And thank you. Have a wonderful night. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody. Thank you.